It's time for Declare Your Independence with Ernest Hancock.
Believe me when I say we have a difficult time ahead of us. But if we are to be prepared for it, we must first shed our fear of it. I stand here without fear because I remember that I am here not because of the path that lies before me, but because of the path that lies behind me. I remember that for 100 years we have fought these machines. And after a century of war, I remember that which matters most. We are still here! Tonight, let us make them remember we are not afraid! No fear here in Declaring Your Independence. Me, Ernest Hancock, and thanks to Alex Newman, short notice. He had to, he just got a little bit of time, so we're going to skip right to the end. Now, Alex Newman and I have met each other several times. I think you've had him on the show before at Red Pill, Jimmer Griffin's stuff. He does a lot of research and speaking, and he's made himself available to make sure we get this information out to the masses, and he started his own podcast doing well. Alex Newman is an award-winning international journalist, educator, author, speaker, investor, nationally syndicated radio host, and consultant who seeks to glorify God in everything he does. In addition to serving as president of Liberty Sentinel Media, Inc., which is his home base, and hosting a nationally syndicated radio program, he's written a wide array of for different publications in the United States and abroad. He currently serves as a contributor to the Epoch Times, a correspondent for the Law Enforcement Intelligence Brief. I guess that's kind of a counter of Southern Poverty Law Center or something, but we can talk about that. And, he's foreign correspondent, senior editor for the New American Magazine, a writer for WorldNet Daily, a contributor to Range Magazine, an education writer for Freedom Project Media, a columnist for Illinois Family Institute, and much more. But he's limited on time, so we won't go into the much more pages and pages. Now, this is the one thing that I wanted to make sure everybody knew. Yesterday, I think it was a couple days ago, I had watched a program that he had done with a gentleman in Washington State about water rights. I have a good friend and supporters that live up in northeastern Washington State, and we went with them while we were visiting last summer or the summer before to Olympia, the capital there, and it has been a years-long battle for them to use their own water spring on their property to irrigate their land and their little farm, and some agency of they, them, those, whatever, you're so not allowed because you're not allowed because we say. Well, this land had before, what's up? Well, what happened was they went through the process, and the state says, all right, well, we have these water experts and these contractors and experts that you could hire. You hire one of them, yeah, this one. They do an evaluation, report back to us, and we'll see. They go through it, they report back, they go, yeah, they're fine. They got way more than they need. Nobody else is needed. It goes right into the Columbia River. We're all good. And they go, nah, we don't like it. We think we'll decline anyway. I sat there and watched this, all the testimony, high-priced lawyers going up against their, of course, their side's all wearing masks and blue hair. And it is amazing. But what happened is now they have the opportunity, they can appeal, they keep going, we'll go to the Supreme Court. It's going to be, wow. There was no logic or reason to it. Something is going on. Well, Alex had a gentleman on yesterday. We're going to try and get him on too. And kind of explained it to you, but it all dovetails into all the other stuff that you cover. So what got you on the Washington water right thing, and how does it relate to all the other stuff, Alex?
Well, thanks very much for having me, Ernest. It's great to be with you again. And what's happening with the water in Washington is just the tip of the iceberg. What really is going on here, and not just across the United States, but around the world, is a war on farmers. They are trying to remove and destroy small, independent, medium-sized farmers, food producers from their land, and basically replace these producers with big fascistic government-controlled corporations that will do whatever the establishment wants, genetic engineering, bugs for food, and all the rest of it. So they've got all kinds of different pretexts, right? I've been covering this story for well over a decade. It started with what I saw happening in South Africa, where they claimed it was a racial justice issue. Brazil, they claimed it was about Indians. Now they're just basically saying, we're just going to kick you off your farm because climate change or whatever. And that's what's happening in Washington, right? Of course, if you take away a farmer or a rancher's access to water, you're going to destroy their business. You're going to destroy their ability to produce food. And that is what's happening in Washington State. That is what's happening all across the world, is any possible pretext to remove farmers and ranchers from their land and take total control, make a monopoly out of the food supply. That's where they're going with this. Understand? The energy means control of the people, and that is their objective.
Why? Is it money? Is it a philosophical thing? So they get more stripes and get to sit in the front row in hell? I mean, what is it that they're doing?
Well, maybe both of those things. But, I mean, they use different excuses, right? In South Africa, they said because of apartheid, they had to take all the farms from the people who owned them. In Brazil, they said because Indians once walked there, they had to take all the farms from the people who owned them. In fact, they wiped whole villages off the map. In China, they didn't even need an excuse. They just said, get off the land or we'll kill you. Don't worry, we made a nice slave box apartment for you in the big cities. So, enjoy your new slave box. In the Netherlands, they said it was, nitrogen, Europa 2000, global warming, whatever. The Bundy Ranch, they say, a desert tortoise or whatever. Washington, they say water. They've got all these different excuses. But the big reason, Ernest, that I think what everybody needs to understand is they know that if you control the food, you control the people. That's what's going on here. If you go back to Henry Kissinger, back in the 1970s, he did National Security Memorandum 200, where he actually talked about using food as a weapon. They wanted to depopulate the third world. They thought there was too many useless eaters in third world countries, and they said, we can use food to control them. We can use food to force their governments to sterilize and abort them out of existence under the guise of too many people as a national security threat to the United States. They understand that if they can control the food supply, they can control us. And it really boils down to that. Now, if you look at the UN 2030 agenda, which is what they call the master plan for humanity, most of this revolves around the climate hoax, right? The idea is that climate change is bad and humans are causing climate change and agriculture produces 33% of emissions. And so if we destroy agriculture, then we will stop climate change. Of course, they don't mention that agriculture produces 100% of our food, which is kind of important to this conversation, you would think. But, you don't want to let a pesky detail like that get in the way. So as you read these 17 Sustainable Development Goals, we got to destroy farming because of water. We got to destroy farming because of climate. We got to destroy farming because of, pick your fake excuse. But it all ultimately boils down to they want to control us. They want to enslave us. And they know that if we don't have food, we'll do whatever we're told to do to get food.
They're not being shy about it either. Why? What do you think? They're being
I think
open.
In some countries, they don't need to be shy about it.
Well, why? Because they're China? We kill you?
Yeah, right. In China, the government doesn't need to explain itself, right? The government said so. It's kind of like parents, right? Because I said so. There's no talking back to daddy government, or we'll put you in a re-education camp, or destroy your family, or chop your organs out, right? It's just that simple. But I think they're getting to a point now where they feel very confident that they can do whatever they want to us, right? Now, for a long time, they had to be very careful about what they said publicly because we still had enough means at our disposal where if we got really upset with them and said, you can't do that, we had the means to enforce that. We could use state, local, federal authority to rein some of this stuff in. But today they've gotten very brazen. And I think part of it is, it's just too obvious, right? We're so
but
close
I want
to
to
the
know
end
what
now
changed.
that they have to be obvious. You can't hide what you're doing at this point anymore.
What changed, though? is there some law that was done? It's kind of like
what changed between when they were hiding it more and now?
Yeah, no, I mean back then, I think it's more open, more known, because if we have the internet, there is a lot of people paying attention. They're going no, and they're doing their live TikToks of saying this person right here, look at him, there's his face, here's his doxing him, whatever. They're doing this stuff, and then it really started, for me to really see what was going on with the raw milk thing with the Amish, and then the meat, and during the Ron Paul revolution in 08 and 12, the raw milk deal. And then they get cases to where it goes all the way to Supreme Court, and they go, yeah, we probably couldn't have done that, And they were a little bit timid until they weren't. And did they feel a sense of urgency because of the internet? They had a mission plan, and gosh darn it, we got to do it now or never. It just seems weird. I don't. To what end? And you're going. Let's talk about this. You're going to the UN climate change conference in Brazil. Alex Newman gets to go to Brazil and say what's up. So, what is going on there, and what impact, or what are you going to do while you're there?
Well, sure. Thanks, Ernest. And I'll start with your first question. Why are they more open? Well, they were always going to have to be more open, right? A great patriot from the 1950s and 60s, Robert Welch, who founded the John Birch Society, he predicted back then that at some point these evildoers were going to have to do the equivalent of running naked through the street, where everybody was going to see what they were doing, trying to enslave and manipulate and control us. And there was no point hiding it anymore because it was going to be obvious to everyone. And I think we're rapidly approaching that point where not only do they have no desire to hide it, they can't hide it anymore. It's clear anybody who has a brain. And I think we're rapidly approaching that point. There comes a point where they think we're far enough into the revolution, our institutions have been so destroyed, our children have been so brainwashed that there's no going back. I mean, you can know about it. In 1991, George H.W. Bush went on national television and said, we're going to have a New World Order, and when we are successful, and we will be, we're going to have a credible United Nations, and this credible United Abominations is going to use its peacekeeping role, which is its war-making role, to implement the vision of the UN founders. He said it in plain English on national television. Why would he be so brazen about it? Well, because they were confident that success was imminent and that it was inevitable. And he said it himself, when we are successful, and we will be. Not a speck of doubt in his voice. So they believed, I think, that they had so structured society, they had so captured the hearts and minds of the next generation that they didn't need to hide it anymore. Right? We'll just run naked through the streets. You're all going to be able to see it, and there's nothing you're going to be able to do about it. And the climate hoax is actually a really good example of this. Yes, I'm headed to Brazil in just a few days. I try to go to the UN Climate Summit every year. I used to live in Brazil, so I've got a soft spot in my heart for Brazil. My dad always used to say it's got tremendous potential, and it always will. Only somebody who's been to Brazil would get that. But so what they're planning to do is continue this climate hoax. And as I mentioned, this is a really good example. They've done the polling. They know most Americans, in fact, the strong majority of Americans, do not even believe that human activities are causing climate change, right? Less than 1 in 3, when they did a poll, Americans is willing to pay $1 single $1 on their monthly electric bill to solve climate change. So they have no legitimacy at all. They know the American people are not interested in this hoax. We don't believe them. And yet they're still pushing forward. There's almost 100,000 people meeting in the Amazon rainforest right now, plotting on how they're going to create a new global environmental council that's going to enforce the UN's decisions. Why? Because they don't care anymore that we know and don't believe them. They're running naked through the street, and they're going to have their agenda by hook or by crook. Okay.
I'm going to make a statement. I want you to, with your experience, tell me, how this rings true. Especially, it was in the mid-96 or so, they tried to do a regional government vote here in Arizona to give the counties some kind of legislative authority. And there was a John Birch supporter that was owner of a jewelry store chain here, and he went to us as libertarian activists. We had our own newspaper and all that kind of stuff. And he goes, look, man, we need to get this out, and we need to use your printing press for these flyers against this thing. And it lost like 50.3 to 49 point something. I mean, it was barely lost. And then when they had the smart city thing. Patrick Wood is here. We're good friends. We do presentations together, that kind of stuff. And I could see what they were doing, the smart city thing several years ago. It was the same thing that they were trying to get an initiative passed in Maricopa County here in Arizona. And I'm going, whoa. I go, look, you can't find it. A friend of mine, I paid him a couple $100. Go find this initiative somewhere. He found it in a library archive in Mesa, Arizona, of the actual text of it. It was so hard. They did, because this is before the internet, everything was digitized and put up. And you couldn't find that they even had the election. It wasn't even listed anywhere. I'm like, who are these people? So we go through that, and it was all this stuff. And what I realized is they were doing it by county. When COVID hit and the lockdowns and so on, it was clipboards and guns, their fine hat or whatever, telling you, you're closed, you can't open this, health inspector this, your gym. It was all county stuff. County zoning, county. So my estimation is that what Kissinger and these guys were talking about and how they're going to do it, it had to be the county level. They had to have somebody with the jurisdiction to walk in and say, you can't, you have to, you always, you never. And so as you look at this stuff, are you seeing a big county effort in this thing?
Well, we're seeing a lot of action at the county level, both from the evildoers and from the good guys. If you look, estimates say about 10% of the nation's sheriffs now are members of the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. That's the great Sheriff Richard Mack's organization. So 10% of the nation's sheriffs are ardent defenders of the Constitution, and they're willing to go on record and even become part of an organization that's dedicated to the proposition that sheriffs work to enforce the Constitution and they work for their constituents, not to enforce federal tyranny or even state tyranny on their citizens. If you look at county level action, all across the country, we're seeing counties pass resolutions and even ordinances protecting medical freedom, protecting private property rights, protecting freedom of speech from the totalitarians at every level of government, right? But at the same time, we also see the evildoers very, very active at the county level. I live in Florida. There are a lot of counties here that are on the front lines of trying to basically abolish counties. They want to merge county government functions into these regional governments, these regional super entities that are unaccountable to voters. So the counties are actually a major focal point in this battle. I think a lot of Americans, and I think this has been deliberate. They focus only on presidential politics. They don't worry about what Congress is doing. They don't care about what their state legislature is doing. They don't even care what their city hall or their county commission is doing. But a big part of the battle is actually taking place there. And a lot of the county commissioners, I think, are very naive, right? They have a slick NGO, non-governmental organization that shows up and says, hey, we have a plan to make life in your county better. All you got to do is pass this model ordinance. And suddenly, without realizing it, they're infringing on the private property rights of their local constituents, of their local agricultural producers. And so they don't realize that they're being played by evildoers. A really important example of this is ICLEI. Used to be called the International Council of Local Environmental Initiatives. It is a global group closely working with the United Abominations to bring in these totalitarian sustainable development policies at the county level. Now, your average county commissioner who jumps on board this stuff really doesn't know what they're doing. They're just responding to slick marketing slogans and catchphrases that were developed by marketing gurus with focus groups. And yet so much of the evil that's coming down upon us is coming down from the county level. So the county level needs to be, I think, a focal point of our response to this tyranny. And the sooner people understand that, the sooner we can resist effectively.
I could see it coming, 30 years ago. It was kind of weird to us. We're going, what the hell? Then you find out, and Sheriff Mack is a good friend, and we've covered his constitutional sheriff stuff quite a bit. And what happens is I remember during the Ron Paul Revolution, one of the guys, Mike Minesco, I think it was his name, he walked across the country carrying Sheriff Mack's book, and he went to every sheriff in every county he went through, went and talked to him, gave him the book, made a big deal out of it. And what people started to realize is the highest ranking law enforcement in any locale is the county sheriff. And it's the only law enforcement, that is elected by the people. So here in Arizona, some of the counties, when they were going, you have to, and you got to close your restaurant, and you kind of, well, eventually you say no, they got to have the local sheriff's going to come do something. Not so much, you know? So this is, and I think the world kind of got a view of American politics and its structure because they didn't understand that it's individual states that make up the United Small U states kind of thing. They got an education. You know, you have, you know, the red and blue states. There's all kinds of civics lessons that's been going on, and the people are starting to figure it out. And large help, you know, the people like yourself and the ones that got friends in Brazil can go down there and see what's up. So this has been an open secret, really. It's not that people aren't capable of knowing. There's a truth button on your keyboard. You can go find out. It's just they're so overwhelmed with crap and how many bathrooms there are and what color hair their elementary teacher for their kids has and how sexual. I mean, I'm wondering if all that is just distraction. All that is part of it. It's a mind screw. There's a psychology going. Something wicked this way is here. And I'm wondering how you perceive that. Where does its source? What is the goal? Is it confusion? Is it, I remember the CIA guy, when everybody, what they believe isn't true, we win. Well, it seems like they're doing it, So what do you think all these little aggressions against liberty are about? Is it part of the same thing, or they're just all lumped in? Everybody's going to try and get what they want to get. What do you think is going on?
I think there's some of both, Ernest, and I think an objective look will show that there's a lot of different motivations behind the decisions and the policies that are moving us in this direction. But I look at this through a Christian lens, Ernest, and I can't do anything else. I'm a Christian. I believe the Bible is the Word of God. And the Bible talks about it all over, from Genesis to Revelation, this spiritual war that we find ourselves in. We are in a battle against evil. And I think a lot of people on our side don't see it that way. They still imagine that they're just arguing with people who are well-intentioned and just, have a different policy idea, and that if we just present enough facts and evidence and logic, then suddenly they're going to fall in line and become great little freedom-loving Americans who want the right thing. Not realizing that that's not really what we're up against. We are in a battle against evil. We are in a battle against a diabolical plot that seeks to, as John F. Kennedy explained before he was murdered, enslave every man, woman, and child in this country and around the world. Once you understand that, I think the whole battle takes on a new dimension. I would say it takes on a renewed urgency. And so when you ask what is the ultimate objective, well, I think the ultimate objective is diabolical. It is to steal, kill, and destroy. It is to end liberty. It is to end Western civilization. It is to end the nuclear family. It is to end the nation and ultimately build a totalitarian, and I mean that in the truest sense of the term, global political, economic, and religious system. And right now, if you're paying attention, you're watching the construction of this edifice as we speak. They're bringing all the governments of the world together through the United Nations, with the temporary exception right now of the United States. They're bringing all of the big businesses of the world together. There's a World Economic Forum of Mr. Klaus Schwab and his evil buddies, Larry Fink and company. And they're bringing all the religions of the world together through the UN Faith for Earth initiative, through the Religions for Peace that calls itself the United Nations of Religions. And so you have all the big religions, all the big governments, and all the big businesses marching in lockstep toward this agenda. What else do you say? Either you believe these are well-intentioned morons who believe that saving the environment requires destroying the environment, who believe eliminating poverty requires making everybody poor, or you realize we're actually dealing with people who are pretty smart and know what they're doing. And I suggest to you that the latter is the case.
You went on about state budgets exploding as well, and I remember having on was it John Perkins, the economic hitman, several times over the years early on when he first wrote his book. And, I was hammering on him, the solution is libertarian philosophy of don't do this crap kind of thing. Well, that wasn't really his goal. What he was trying to do was, absolve himself, get forgiveness or something, coming out and saying, man, I was part of it, and you would look at these small countries in Central America and such, that they are, your brains or your signature is going to be on this here document, or we're going to kill you, or if we can't do that, we'll invade you, whatever, we're going to get our way. U.S. empire of. And I'm going, some of these countries don't have, some of our cities have a bigger GDP than them. Our states certainly, the United States is enormously wealthy. And, are they coming here? Well, we did a little bit of research. Hell yeah, they are. America, where the money is. Well, the middle class, where's all the money? Why you rob the bank? That's where the money is. Well, here they're going. They're going after your 401k, your IRA, your pension funds, the great taking. David Webb we've had on a couple times. We could see this coming as political activists, as philosophical, libertarians. It was obvious what was happening, and the purpose of government was to defend against this stuff, and it's facilitating it. So we're going, this is a big giant bank robbery, and they're just going to take everything. I mean, literally, they are setting up the infrastructure for when the dollar goes, and it's gone. And just last few weeks, I've been hammering to my 4 kids, 12 grandkids.
Yep.
I go to my kids, I said, look, get out of paper. Get silver, gold, whatever, get out of paper. If it's on a computer screen and it says it's yours, it ain't, okay? So, I know I'm going to turn out being right, but I'm not going to get any pleasure in saying I told you so. So I'm telling the audience, I go, McDucket, man, you need to roll around in your gold and silver. There is no safe place for anything. If you pay off your land, you might not be first, but then they'll say, well, there's some whatever reason we want to take it. So I'm this trigger pull has already been pulled.
Yeah.
So how long do we got before it's neon flashing obvious a damn? And what role is Trump playing this?
You're absolutely right, Ernest, about what's going on here. And I would go a step further. It's not just a bank robbery. My dad always used to say, if it could be solved with money, it's going to be okay. This is worse than a bank robbery. This is worse than them just trying to steal all your money, all your wealth, all your retirement, all your land, all your houses, all your stocks, all your bonds. They actually want your children. They want your family. They want your soul, ultimately. And when you see what's going on in the government schools, it's the clearest indication of how significant and how nefarious this threat is. So if you look at the data, it's absolutely astounding. The majority of my generation, millennials, now describe themselves as socialists. Only a minority of millennials today describe themselves as Christians, first generation in American history. The generations coming behind us are worse and worse and worse and worse. And so they're going for the big enchilada. They're going for absolutely everything. I believe one of the next things we're going to see, to your point, is what the World Economic Forum refers to as a polycrisis, where they're going to throw crisis after crisis after crisis at us and try to overwhelm us with terror, right? Think about the panic that normal, dumb people who watch too much media felt during COVID. Multiply that by 100, and you'll get some sense of the panic I think they want to instill. They talk about the cyber pandemic that makes the COVID look like a small disturbance. That's Klaus Schwab, right? You look at what they're doing now with the terror cells that are across our country. You look at what they're doing with the potential collapse of the dollar. You mentioned the Great Taking. All of these things converging in one super crisis, one polycrisis of doom would be absolutely catastrophic, and I believe that's what they're going toward right now. As for the timeline, I don't know, but I think they would love nothing more than to blame it on Trump and his supporters and conservatives and Christians and Tea Partiers. So I think we'll probably see it in the not-too-distant future. And I would urge people to take your advice, prepare for this, get out of paper, get real assets, protect your children. Stop sending them to the government brainwash camps. That's their most powerful weapon. I homeschool my 6 children. My wife and I, we use Classical Conversations. It's a wonderful program. I'm on the board of Freedom Project Academy. Wonderful program. Great Christian schools across this country. Great homeschooling programs. Lots of ways to do that. But you've got to take action to protect your family. You've got to take action to protect your wealth and your savings. And you've got to take action to protect your country, because all of them are facing a mortal threat right now.
Yeah, America seems to have been, as you look, there hasn't been really that many, if any, that its primary focus was defense of individual rights, and not this collective guilt or, ethnic cleansing or, by color of your skin, or even sexual orientation is not that big a deal in America, but they push it and they make it a big deal. And then it starts to become obvious that this is a threat to the family unit. You know, and then you get Yuri, what's his name, comes out in the late 70s, early 80s, KGB from Russia, and goes, let me tell you what's going on. This is how they're going to do it. They're going to eat out your substance. They're going to come after the family. They're going to separate families, children from their parents, and they're going to worship the state, and you get a universal basic income or something. So it's here. I see. A lot of us have been warning about this, for decades. You can see it. This, we're doing fine. I go, yeah, now, but you can't. You have to understand the rot, that the cancer that's being planted deep in the cells here. It is inevitable what's coming. Well, it's here. So are we now trying to fix it? Are we going to vote ourselves free? Or do we, kind of focus on ourselves, our family, our community, and, occupy the land? That's our solution. OccupyTheLand.org, with attainable housing. And we're out here doing, the example of this, but it's not just for us. It's an inspiration, is what I always do, like with, a lot of the activities that we do, is to try and get a movement, an understanding of the only way we're going to fix this. Are you political? Do you think we're going to vote ourselves free? Are you're looking for the next, I don't know, somebody's going to do something somewhere or something? I mean, how political are you, Alex?
Well, it's a good question, Ernest, and I don't think this is ultimately a political problem at its core. But, and there's a big but here, not in the gross sense, politics makes a big difference, okay? And I'll just give you the example of the COVID idiocy that we had a few years ago. I hope people still remember that, even though the media would like you to forget. If you were in California or the People's Republic of New York or the Democratic People's Republic of Illinois, you were locked in your basement by force. You couldn't go to church. You couldn't go to your business. You couldn't go visit grandma in the hospital. Here where I live, we didn't have mandatory shutdowns. We didn't have mandatory mask mandates. We didn't have, in fact, when the Biden regime tried to impose these vaccine mandates on us, our governor and our state legislature passed a law saying that anybody who fired somebody for not taking the shot as a result of the federal mandate was going to get a fine 10 times bigger than the federal fine. And so what did that do? That shielded us here in Florida from the worst excesses of the Biden regime. And that was because of politics. That was because decent, honorable Americans went to the polls, voted for decent, honorable men to serve in our city and in our county and in our state, and they stood in between us and the tyrants in Washington, D.C. So ultimately, I don't think it's a political problem, and ultimately, I don't think politics is going to save us. Again, they have your kids, right? You could push them off.
I don't trust the election
20
process.
Years. I don't either. Absolutely not. And I think anybody who does is absolutely foolish at this point. But I do think we have an obligation to be involved politically, and I think politics can make a difference in restraining some of the worst evils. And, to go back to our conversation a moment ago about sheriffs, a good sheriff can make the difference between freedom and slavery the next time there's a poly crisis. During the COVID shutdown, we had a sheriff on the west coast of Florida that literally arrested a pastor for opening his church. Now, that was a result of bad politics. Now, thankfully, our governor stepped in and said, you release that man right now or you're going to be in big trouble. And so the man was released. But this is the kind of thing that we can try to mitigate through involvement in the political process. But ultimately, this is a long-term battle. It's a spiritual battle. So I would encourage people, yes, be involved in politics. Yes, get to know your elected officials. But don't put your hope in politics because it will fail.
Agreed. I've been a political activist since the late 80s. I've seen how the sausage is made. I get it. What got me going was election fraud, election law. I challenged 44 election laws in Arizona with all the Ninth Circuit and whatever. And what I learned, they do what they want. They don't care. But I made them say it. Say it! Well, they're going to rule against you, I know. But I'm going to make them say it. Say it. Well, this has been so obvious, certainly with the 20 election cycle, and we just had pardons by Trump, a bunch of people that were challenging the election, all that kind of stuff. Where's Trump in this? Good guy, bad guy? I'm not feeling. We've been doing for 10 years this last August, since he came down the escalator. Every week we do the Trump report. And I was approached by a gentleman that I knew was a Republican, big supporter of the Ron Paul revolution. And he goes, no, don't be a hater, but I'm going to I want to do a weekly show. I go, bring your butt on. I can say you're still voting a bunch of times. Let's do it. Following Trump this whole time, it was the people that put him there with certain promises that he hasn't kept. And what's your opinion of Trump's role in all of this?
Well, I take a nuanced view. As I mentioned, anyone who puts their hopes in politics is going to be very, very disappointed. In fact, the Bible tells us, put not your hope in princes. So our salvation is not going to come from that. I have been very pleased with some of what Trump has done. We just talked about him going to Brazil for the UN Climate Summit. He just told them to their faces last month that this is the biggest con job in the history of humanity. He is the equivalent of a bull in a climate china shop. He's destroying the architecture of global tyranny based on climate change, which is actually the pretext for much of what they're doing in terms of building this tyrannical global system. Are there bad people in his administration? Yep. I could name a bunch of them. Scott Bessent at the Treasury Department, Howard Lutnick at the Commerce Department are two who come to mind immediately. Are there good people in the administration? Yes, there is. There are many who I know, who I've known for years. The Secretary of War actually endorsed my last book, Indoctrinating Our Children to Death. I worked with him on his Fox documentary, Miseducation of America. He's a great patriot, and he loves God, and he loves his country. And there are many others like that who are around him who are decent people. So I take a nuanced view on this. I'm very pleased with some of what Trump has done. I'm very alarmed by some of what Trump is doing, including the Genius Act, the Clarity Act, the Stable Act. And so the COVID was another good example. I like to take the charitable view. I believe he was duped and deceived by people like Fauci and Birx. I hope they all get prosecuted. I don't think he did it out of malice. I think he was given very terrifying scenarios and told that this is what had to happen. And yeah, I think he was misled into believing that this was something that it wasn't, and that the solution was something that it wasn't. And he comes from the business world. He's used to his subordinates doing what he tells them to do. He's used to his subordinates giving him their honest perspective, not trying to manipulate or deceive him. So I try to take a charitable view. I'm grateful for a lot of what he's done, but folks, don't put your hope in Donald Trump. Put your hope in God.
Hey, before you go, I know you got to go, but I got to ask this one question. Charlie Kirk's assassination was not a big surprise. Them going after Tucker Carlson, trying to, and this is an Israel thing. I mean, how culpable is Israel and the support structure around that? Are they the center of it? Are they a tool by they, them, those won't leave us alone? What's the role that Israel is playing in this, and what do we need to glean from this that we need to do in our foreign policy? What do you think?
Well, I think Israel has the same problem that the United States have, is that we have evildoers in our government, and they have evildoers in their government. And Benjamin Netanyahu, the first clue that something wasn't quite right with him was that he ordered everybody in Israel to take the COVID shots, right? First of all, it's a blatant violation of freedom. Second of all, I think it was horrific for their health. So, I think they're dealing very much with what we are dealing with here. I knew Charlie. I worked closely with Charlie. In fact, I spoke at many of his events and considered him a friend. Really, really appreciated him. He was very much pro-Israel, despite some of what you're hearing from Candace Owens right now. He may not have necessarily agreed with every policy of the Israeli government. I don't think anybody does. But generally speaking, he was very much in favor of Israel existing, very much in favor of allowing them to defend themselves. And he had some, I think, legitimate questions about some of the actors in their government and some of the people who operate within the Israeli deep state, if you will. But what is the role of Israel in all this? I think the deep state in Israel is very much like the deep state in the United States. It is betraying its own people for very sinister purposes. And I think we would be foolish to not recognize that. There's a lot of Christians out there who think the state of Israel can do no wrong. I personally think that's a dangerous perspective. If you read your Bible, even historic Old Testament Israel has had some pretty nasty leaders. King Ahab and his wicked wife Jezebel come to mind. You can still love Israel. You can still think fondly of the Jews without saying we must embrace every single thing that every person who leads Israel says or believes. And so I think, again, a nuanced perspective is good. There are some bad actors over there, and there are also some very decent, honorable folks over there, some of whom I know. Last time I was over there, I had some very nice interviews with some of their leadership. The Deputy Speaker of the Knesset did an hour-long interview with him, one of the most fascinating interviews I've ever done. And so I would encourage people to take all of it with a nuanced perspective. Yes, there are bad actors. Yes, there are decent, honorable people. I would say the people in Israel are facing a lot of the same struggles that we are facing. And, we've got to, all of us, people in every country, we've got to try to root out this evil from within our own governments if we hope for freedom to survive.
The attack on Christians seems real. And I'm going, why? It's the mindset of individual rights, the mindsets of not this, ethnic, religious, identity politics, is not a thing in our heritage and culture. I remember in the 2008 campaign, Dr. Paul said, he goes, if we don't do this now, we're not going to be able to do it. We're not going to even understand the definition of the words. It's like 1984 and they're behind schedule kind of thing. So it's the turn to religion, certainly Christianity, by the youth, is heartening. I'm glad, this is a battle that has become clearly spiritual. It is a principled thing. And the politics get in the way of that, in my estimation. And any politics that we're going to do, get down to the county and local level, because I can see that's where the rubber meets the road. And from the mid-'90s, when they did this regional government thing, I could see there was a mechanism. And then it played out during COVID. And it was I go, oh, I knew this. But a lot of us, like Sheriff Mack, yourself, Giera Griffin, ourselves, Freedom's Phoenix, we were documenting the chronology of all of this stuff. But now it's come to a head. And in my estimation, it is always a food thing. Sooner or later, it's going to be too expensive, not available, and they're trying to do that. They are, killing all the birds, killing all the cattle, taking away the farms. I mean, it is a conscious, directed effort. And that's where it is. We got to get back to the Liberty Garden thing. I mean, on our land here, we weren't thinking of planting until like this spring, but fortunately in Arizona, you can pretty much, except July and August, you can plant anything. But, we really started focusing on food. And I'm just going, man, it's going to be a food thing. Bottom line, when it's a food thing, people are going to be compromising all the crap when they need food. How far off am I?
I think you're exactly right. It's one of the reasons why my family and I are moving out to our farm in just a couple of months. We're in the final stages of construction. And I would encourage everybody, get to know your local farmers, get to know your local ranchers. Don't depend on the Walmarts of the world and the Costcos of the world to make sure that your children can eat. If you do, you may be in for some very tough times ahead. There's absolutely a war on our food supply. There's absolutely a war on our farmers. And we need to deal with that with the seriousness it deserves. So I would encourage everybody, make some backup plans right now. Start buying your meat, start buying your eggs, start buying your milk, start buying your cheese, your butter, your produce from local farmers that that you can support, that you can deal with directly, that may save your life.
I think so. There's so much more we can talk about. I know you got to go. Thanks for giving me this time, Alex, on such short notice. And I'm glad that we got to talk to you before you went to Brazil. Can we talk to you after?
Would love to. I really appreciate you having me on, Ernest. I'm a big fan, as you know. Thank you for having me on today. And I would love to talk to you either from Brazil or when we get back. So let's be in touch.
Well, how long are you going to be in Brazil?
Should be a little over a week.
Okay. Well, we'll wait till you get back because I want to get the full skinny on what up and how successful they are. When you get, Klaus Schwab goes and here comes Larry Fink. Oh, we're saved now. I mean, wow, holy crap. It's so bad. And I don't get the impression they're fearful. They care. Is there a civil war? Do they want, bullets exchanged, through the air? I mean, it seems that they do. I don't think it's going to be a very long Civil War. I mean, America has guns. I know a lot of other countries like Australia and Canada, they're going, damn, we shouldn't have gave up our guns, And if we lose that, that'd be bad. That'd be bad. Just the idea that we can resist is what I think bothers them. There, you got a little bit too much moxie over there. You think that you're going to resist us. Are you sure? We got, Biden we got M16s and F16s. We're going to whip ass. I'm going, yeah. Tell that to the insurgents, all around the Middle East, whatever. You got your big army, and they go, nah, we're going to say no anyway. I'm glad you're there, Alex. Thank you very much for coming on. This is just started. They say the end is nigh. I'm like, nah, the beginning is nigh. Once this starts, it's going to be a spiritual thing, a principled thing, what philosophy. I'm a libertarian. The purpose of government, defend my rights, boom, done. You own yourself. Next. I mean, what philosophy would you say identifies your actions?
I'm a libertarian too. In fact, I used to use that term all the time to describe myself until it got too closely associated with the abortion movement and all that. But I'm a libertarian, and I believe essentially the same thing about government. The father's position. If you look at what Samuel Adams wrote in 1772 on the rights of the colonists, that's where actually Thomas Jefferson got the language for the Declaration of Independence. We believe that God gave us rights, a right to life when he said, thou shalt not murder, our right to property when he said, thou shalt not steal, our right to liberty when he said, proclaim liberty throughout all the land and to all the inhabitants thereof. God is the author of liberty, says it repeatedly throughout the scriptures. And we believe that the purpose of government is to punish those who violate our rights. In fact, that's what the scripture says. Government is to punish evil, and that's how it's defined. So I am a Christian and a libertarian, and I believe that the purpose of government, like our founder said, is to protect our rights and punish those who violate them.
Part 2 coming up soon. Now, we've had you on several times before, but, it's not academic anymore. I mean, it's real. Here it is. It's doing something, and we're doing what I think is the ultimate: occupy the land, man. Get some acres and start growing and do. I don't see any other peaceful solution. And then there's going to be somebody with a clipboard and a gun going to come try to explain it to me, and then you got to make decisions. So I'm glad you're there, Alex, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Certainly within a couple of weeks after you get back from Brazil, because you just want to get their mindset. I'm glad the guys that went to Bilderberger, people that have gone to the WEF, people that have, this is what they're saying it. This is what they're doing. And I don't think they expect resistance, or how would the resistance come? A lot of it, going to church, educating your own kids, understanding philosophically the proper role of government, and read the Declaration of Independence. It's it's why my show is called Declare Your Independence with Ernest Hancock, because it had such a clear vision. And this is a decade before the Constitution. Then they try to do this Constitution semi-central plan thing, and they go, whoa. We need a Bill of Rights, or we're going to have us another revolution here directly. So America is so unique in the philosophical understanding of the experiment. Well, did it fail? Not yet. But if it fails, it's because we allowed it to, because it is the right philosophy. Thank you, Alex. I appreciate you coming on. I'll let you go because I know you got to get going. But I tell you, thank you for doing this, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you so much, Ernest. Looking forward to it. God bless you, sir.
Peace.